For more developments out of the Vatican this morning, we're joined now by CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay. Chris, you're among the first to report this news out to the world. And of course, you're there gauging reaction from people who had gathered for Easter Sunday. What type of reaction are you seeing? And the level of shock, I would imagine, since the Pope was visible on Sunday.
Indeed, Errol, it was shocking. I mean, I watched the announcement come in live. It was sort of a passing note that they sent out on their Telegram channel that there was going to be a broadcast from the residence of Pope Francis. And as soon as I got there, I saw these four leaders of the church talking very somberly, and I couldn't believe my ears when they said that Pope Francis had returned to the Father, returned to God in heaven, that he had died. Ever since then, I rushed out to St. Peter's Square here, and there was just a deafening silence waiting for me, and that's despite the throngs of people that began to flood into St. Peter's Square. Perhaps not as many as there would have been for two reasons. One, it's because it's Pasquetta today in Italy. That's Little Easter or Easter Monday. It's a holiday. A lot of people are traveling. And also because yesterday we saw Pope Francis make this comeback, this miraculous return after nearly dying in the hospital. He was discharged just about 3 weeks ago. Remember that doctors said that they had to consider letting him go. Such was the severity of his condition in the hospital, but he bounced back. Now, remember also that the doctors told him, strict orders, you need to stay home, avoid mixing with the public, and rest for at least 2 months. Well, it's barely been 3 weeks, and we've seen him out in the squares, mixing with tens of thousands of people. He was at a prison on Thursday, interacting with 70 inmates, clearly defying doctors' orders. The pull of Holy Week, just too much for this Pope to resist. And all of it, of course, turned into being a dress rehearsal for that triumphant comeback on Sunday. He was here in St. Peter's Square, riding around in the Pope Mobile, the first time we had seen that since he was discharged. But ultimately, it became his last appearance on Easter Sunday. Just a remarkable timeline of events, Errol.
And Chris, it also puts into a different light that bounce back and comeback that you're speaking about. I remember having so many live conversations with you during the Pope's time in hospital, and it was really touch and go day to day before doctors were able to bring him to a place where he could leave. So I'm wondering why the Pope potentially decided to defy doctors' orders and not stay in his apartment and isolate and rather be out with the faithful, whether it was at that juvenile prison or Sunday there on the balcony. You know, perhaps there was a drive in him to be visible during what would be his last few weeks alive.
Yes, that is indeed what people close to Pope Francis are saying. When doctors gave him those marching orders to stay home and rest for 2 months, everyone here knew that that was a tall order. And in fact, it only took a few weeks to see the opposite of Pope Francis, known as the people's Pope. And that is for a reason. It's because he's just known for that love, that relationship he has with the crowds who come out to see him, the man, Pope Francis. So not only was this Holy Week a huge draw, the most important week on the Catholic calendar, it's also a Jubilee year. That happens only once every quarter century, and Pope Francis had already had to sit out so much of it, canceling a number of public appearances. We know from people close to him that profoundly pained him to see people coming to Rome to see him during this holy year and not be able to. So he wasted no time in getting back into the square, into his Pope Mobile, into the prisons in order to interact with the sheep, as he called that. In fact, he said that he liked to have the smell of the sheep on his body, using that allegory from the Bible of the shepherd and the sheep. Him, of course, Pope Francis being the shepherd, and the more than 1 billion Catholics in the world, being those sheep. You know, just last night, Errol, I had dinner with a close aide of Pope Francis, and I asked him, what do you think? I mean, what does this say about Pope Francis that he wastes no time in getting out into the public, perhaps at risk of his own life? And he told me, Chris, Pope Francis wants to die on the battlefield. Errol.
Wow, Chris, that really carries more power, especially today. We do, as you mentioned, the world's more than 1 billion Catholics now have a statement from one of them. Former U.S. President Joe Biden has released a statement saying, quote, "It is with great sadness that Jill and I learn of the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis. He was unlike any who came before him. Pope Francis will be remembered as one of the most consequential leaders of our time, and I am better for having known him." The end of the former president's statement reads, "He prompted equity and an end to poverty and suffering across the globe. And above all, he was a pope for everyone. He was the people's pope, a light of faith, hope, and love." Chris Livesay is there in Rome for us as we continue to absorb this news. Chris, what happens next?
Well, Errol, there is a process this evening when Pope Francis's body, around 8 o'clock local time, will be placed inside of a coffin. It will then lie in state here in St. Peter's Basilica for the next 5 to 6 days, at which point he will be buried. Now, all of this is happening during a 9-day period of mourning, which started as soon as the news was announced that Pope Francis had died. Now, the big wait is for the conclave. That's the event when cardinals from all around the world will descend upon Rome to elect the new pope of the Catholic Church. That is going to take place between 15 and 20 days from now. It is, to say the least, a historic event.
Chris Livesay, live for us in Rome. Chris, thank you. We'll be speaking throughout the day.